Hello and welcome to our Teacher to Trainer transition event. Thank you all for joining, whether you're here live or watching this on recording. This is a new type of program for L&D Philly. Myself, as well as other people in the community who have been more established in training roles. I think it would be fair to say that over the last couple of years, we've heard from our friends and neighbors and colleagues who are out there who are in teaching positions and wanting to learn more about learning and development. So a little bit of intro here to kick this off. So my name is Josh Mayleaf. I am the president of L&D Philly, as well as the moderator for tonight's panel. I am not a former teacher. I did originally start my journey in L&D by going back to school I thought I was going to get my teaching certification, and along the way ended up focusing on adult education, and that's where I've been for the last 11 plus years now, is doing facilitation, instructional design, those kind of things. And so I'll be moderating because we have a great panel of people tonight. And I may throw in some of my own insights if I have anything good to share as well. What I would like to do too is, since many of you are new to finding L&D Philly, take a minute and talk about L&D Philly. So what is it? We've got the long description that's up on our website, which is on the slide right now. I'm not going to read it, but I'll tell you a little bit about us. First off, we're a 501c3 nonprofit and a professional association that is really dedicated to helping the community to be able to build their skills. One of the things that comes up a lot in the world of training, and may also, now that I think about it, in teaching circles, is, in our case, who trains the trainer? And that's really the beginning of where we started as an organization, is that when you are the training team at an organization, and you're providing the training for other people who provide your training. So one nice thing about the learning and development and training community is that it's a very supportive group. I know when I first got into this, because I mentioned going back to school, I was second career, found many supportive people along the way who helped me learn what I needed to do and where to go. And that's why we're doing this panel. And then we may do some other programming specific to this as well. But the key of all of our stuff, and where I think it'll be helpful specifically to people in this audience, is the fact that we are really designed for practitioners. So what does that mean? It means that something that you come to one of our workshops to learn about, you hopefully will pick up some things that you can apply back on your job. Or in your case, if you're job hunting, or I should say in the case of those who are job hunting, what you may come across is, oh, this is something that I can learn about. And so when it comes up on an interview, I can speak intelligently about it. Or maybe you learn about a new skill that you need to dive deeper into. But either way, it's all about being hands-on learning. So that's a little bit about our organization. In the chat, you will see our website is ldphilly.com. You all had to register for this event. So you've been on the site and you're now getting our emails. So you'll see our upcoming events. And I encourage you to take a look at those. There's a pretty wide range of things that we're going to be offering. The other thing that was promised in the description, and Lindsay will take care of putting this into the chat. So what we are doing is we are offering a free membership for people who are transitioning from the classroom and looking to get into training. And basically all you need to do is you're already in the system for registering for this. Literally just send an email, and all I want to know is, name of your current or most recent school district, your years of experience as a teacher, and if you know what you want to do in L&D, what that is. Right. And that helps us a little bit with some demographic info for our future programming, and also just make sure that, we're getting the right people here. And so the nice thing about this is our membership is actually pretty low to begin with. It's only $25 a year, but you do get a free year for being in this transition. And if you choose to, at the end of that year, you'll get invoiced for the $25 to continue. One of the great benefits is, as I mentioned, I'm recording this session. we record most of our workshops unless there's reasons with proprietary stuff or presenters where we can't. So we have a great library of information that'll be out there for you. And I encourage you to send that email. You can do it afterwards, and I'll put this up at the end as well. So let me pause there for a moment and just see if there's any questions from our participants as to about the organization or anything else about tonight before I introduce our panel. All right, that seems like a no. Oh, wait, hold on. I see a hand. Whoever raised their hand, if you want to come off mute and ask your, or sorry, was that a wave? I lied. That was a wave reaction in chat, which confused me as a hand raise. So on that note, this is a good time for me to introduce Lindsay. So let me here. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. So Lindsay, who you will see is, you know, I should have set up my background. I'm realizing now Lindsay is our producer, is clearly the most professional member of our panel tonight. She is going to, she's modeling our what do I want? I guess our polo shirts. I was trying to think of something more clever than that and failed. But so as our event producer tonight, she'll be monitoring the chat. If you do have questions, I will encourage you to use the hand raise function within Zoom. But if you don't know where that is, or you can't, you know, you can always just go in the chat and put something in. I'll be watching it. Lindsay, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
And also, although not a member of the panel, also a teacher who has moved into the L&D world. So thank you, Lindsay. Let me go back to my screen here for a moment. All right, so I want to introduce you to our panel. And so we have 4 people who volunteered to share their experiences and a little bit about what our experience has been about breaking into L&D. And we come from a variety of different backgrounds. I shared my story a little bit. We're just going to go in order of the pictures on here. So let's start off with Amy Dinning.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Amy Dinning, and I'm a talent and development leader. Currently working for Quaker Houghton, a industrial fluids company in Conshohocken. I'm maybe a little bit of an enigma in the panel because I have not been a teacher. However, I operate a lot of volunteer time in the job seeker realm. So I've had many teachers call me for advice about what do we do to break into L&D. So that's why Josh asked me to be here and to share tonight. And I'm happy to share, I'm happy to connect, and happy to help, because I think there is a lot of room to move over and use your skills. So I hope we encourage you tonight in our panel. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Amy. All right, Liz, you're next.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Liz. My career started out in Jewish education. I did classroom teaching, a whole bunch of other stuff in the field, and my last job in the field that I loved was as an adult education director at a college for a continuing education program. I began to explore different kinds of adult education around 2012, and I zeroed in on instructional design, which, as you'll probably learn tonight, is a very broad, a broad description of a career title. I was in my early 50s at the time and had a lot of difficulty convincing prospective employers that my skills as an educator would indeed transfer into corporate or healthcare or government contexts. I ended up having many consulting gigs in different industries before landing at Einstein in a wonderful role as the senior and only instructional designer for a 9,000 person hospital. Einstein merged with Jefferson Health about a year and a half ago, and unfortunately I was let go last week in an enormous purge of 1% of the workforce. So like many of you, I am in the market again. It's very, very different this time post-pandemic, with a lot of attention having been brought to the online learning industry and also remote work. But one thing that has been enormously helpful for me is networking. The way I decided I wanted to go into L&D is before L&D Philly was even founded, I attended an ATD conference. And like, I like that. And then when L&D was formed, I was immediately into it. And I've been volunteering in various capacities with L&D Philly since its inception.
Thank you, Liz. More to come on that. All right, Nicole, you're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Alati. I am an instructional designer at Temple Health currently. But believe it or not, my background is actually health and phys ed with adapted phys ed. So for those in elementary, do not worry. There is absolutely transferable skills that we can go into later that you bring a lot to the plate. My introduction in the world of learning and development actually was a program manager in the financial district up in New York City. So I really broke in, feet first, head first. But now I'm in healthcare and very happy to be in that realm. So all in all, I've been within HR and learning and development for about 9 years and taught prior in an unconventional classroom, but still had school-age children and did substitute teaching. So again, was able to use some of those transferable skills. And I'm excited to share how I kind of navigated the unknown.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nicole. Looking forward to hearing all of that. And last but not least, Shannon.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon Gulak. I am presently a teacher in the School District of Philadelphia. I just finished my 20th year in the classroom. I actually started contemplating the switch pre-pandemic, went through the pandemic, and I'm really close to just making the switch. I don't have to tell you what it's been like. You all know. I guess the nice word is unsustainable. That another former teacher who I spoke with used. And yeah, I'm going through the transition, but what I can share with you are some things that my career counselor has encouraged me to do, some things that Liz and Josh have encouraged me to do. And, the fact that I had an interview today and I have 2 more this week, is just getting me really excited to come up with a new challenge. So I know how you all feel, and give you some tips on what I've been going through, because it looks like I'm finally starting to make some headway, and I hope you all do too.
Fantastic. Thank you all. All right. So we are now ready for the discussion portion here. So there's no reason for me to share anything during this. Obviously no requirement to be on camera, but at least this way you can see our panelists when they're talking a little bit better. And if any of you want to ask questions, you can. So let's open that up first here to see if there's anybody who wants to kick us off with a question from the audience. Again, if not, I've no pressure. I've got some stuff ready to go, but is there anybody who wants to start off by asking something? And all the pressure, like, what should I ask? What are we going to be talking about? That's a good question. All right. So first question, and I'm going to, I don't want to butcher your name. Is it Diane?
Yeah, it's Diane. It's Diane.
Oh, let's see, this is why I don't try that normally. Thank you. All right. So first steps to transition. So you want to know, and Shannon may be the right person to get this started, but so you're kind of asking, like, I know I want to transition. Where do I start?
Correct.
Shannon.
Yeah, well, actually, I started, but I think I'm just meeting a deadlock and I'm not making any headway. I'm like,
Okay.
Feeling very
You-
disillusioned with the
You know,
process.
so Shannon being is still in the transition stage. One thing I'll say is she said she's been chasing down some stuff, including taking some courses and along those lines. So I think you have some valuable experiences to share. So why don't you start us off?
Sure. First of all, welcome. Thank you for coming. I remember thinking that too, like, what am I gonna do? Like, what have I gotten myself into and what am I gonna get, how am I gonna get out of it? I spoke with my career counselor, at my undergrad, and she was enormously helpful. You do need to kind of get clear on the kind of things that you want to do. Then once I did that, then I kind of went after some courses, like some certifications. There's some really inexpensive ones online. Some are more expensive than others. Took some of those too. To kind of show on your resume and on your LinkedIn, yeah, I've been in the classroom for this time, but I also know this about the services that your organization needs as well.
Hey, Shannon, let me pause you real quick because I want to go back to something before we get too far away from it. You mentioned the career counselor. So you're talking about from your alma mater, because
Yeah.
if you've been teaching for 20 years, I'm guessing it's a while since undergrad. So,
It is.
okay.
Actually, it was before the turn of the century, Josh. It's what I
Yeah,
like to tell my
yeah,
children.
me too. But what I was going to say is, and I think I've done the same actually. My alma mater for undergrad happens to be Penn State, and they have an alumni career center. I know that other universities do too, so I think that's a good place to start because usually they want to help you in hopes that you'll give them some money at some point. But back to you, Shannon. As far as I think, like you mentioned, there's a bunch of free stuff, and I will guarantee that somewhere during the evening tonight we'll talk about some of the resources that are out there where you can self-educate. But you also went down the path of taking some certification courses that you did go out of pocket for. So I don't know if you have, and by the way, you absolutely, like, to the point Shannon made, there's a lot of free stuff out there, and I think we'll focus on that. But one way to get credentials without having to go back to enroll in a graduate degree program is there are a lot of certificate opportunities out in the world. And I think that's a good thing to bring up that you were about to hit on, Shannon.
Yes. So before school was out, I did work just like a little bit each day on I just did like Udemy classes, which they have sales on, and just to get me familiar with language and concepts. And at the end of the school year, I did take an ATD week-long training, which was great. And I'm currently enrolled in a part-time instructional design program that I chose because it wasn't as, like, if you decide to go into instructional design, you'll see promoted this course from someone called Devlin Peck. And it's real, like, it looks like a really well packaged kind of a thing, but it's like kind of expensive. So I found this one, Emeritus, which is, if you have grad courses under your belt, you can do that. It was about half the price, but they still offer help with a portfolio and career counseling as well. So I felt like it was all the things that I really wanted from that other program, just for like half the price. So
Yeah. I think one thing I want to bring up here too, that I feel like is a service to anybody watching this now or in the future, is you hit on it. Be really careful if you're going to consider one of those academies that are out there. I have heard from people in my network that there's some real predatory stuff going on out there. If you see somewhere that says, sign up for our academy, give us 10 grand and we'll guarantee you're going to get a 6-figure job. Yeah, that doesn't pass the smell test. And there are a few that I am willing to recommend. The one that I will, and even in this case, I know somebody who's taken it, who was a teacher actually. The one that I feel good about though, and again, I would still encourage you to do your own research. And the reason I like this guy is he would tell you to do your research on him too. His name is Tim Slade, and he runs an instructional design certification program that includes like a community and ongoing support. I'll try to track down that link, but if you Google Tim Slade, it's SLADE, you'll find that. So again, a lot of stuff out there. Let's jump to Nicole here. So again, back to same topic still, and then we'll move on to another one. But as far as like first steps in getting started, I don't know if you have memories from when you made your transition of as to what your first steps were.
Yeah, so mine was very similar of just trying to get feelers out there. I'll be honest with you. I did start in HR as a recruiting coordinator, one that was supposed to be temporary. It was just, I moved up to New York City from Pennsylvania, knowing that I had to like re-credential for the new state and area. And it was kind of buying time, to be honest with you. I was like, okay, I'll figure it out along the way, but I'll have a job to help me get there. But in the mix of all of that, I ended up getting to know HR a lot better and greater through networking. And that's how I found the learning and development side, the program management side. And ultimately, I looked inward and I said, what really matters to me as a long-term goal and career? I'm a teacher. I want to make a difference in this world. I want to make the impact. Does it need to be with children? Yes, of course, I love them and I would love to do that. But that to me was where I started. What really matters to me? Where can I make the impact? And so that kind of helped me then speak to other people within HR to say, I know that seems fluff, because we're in corporate financial world, and to say something like that, they're kind of, they look at you a little funny. But thankfully, I had some mentors to say, why don't you look at learning and development? Why don't you look at program management, early careers, and what that looks like? So that's like internship programs that you give someone while they're in college or, transitioning in a general sense. So I was, to have a platform like this tonight, I'm excited to be able to give back to say, I had some difficulties and I know the pain that you're going through to try to navigate that. But you're starting now, and this is absolutely a fantastic way to start. And I do welcome to, I know we may get that at the end, but if you want to reach out to me at any point in time, I'm happy to discuss. But I would say just start with your passion. What do you really enjoy? So for me, I really enjoyed making that impact. I knew that I enjoyed also in the instructional design piece. I organically kind of fell into realizing I like doing lesson plans because it told a story. And so part of instructional design is telling that story but in a content that's going to be relevant for the population. A lot of those soft skills that we all know to love really do translate into the adult learner as well. So you talk about empathy, communication, those things that they're almost innate to us as teachers. But then realizing that they all need us. Everyone needs us to kind of elaborate. And we understand how a learner works and what the learner may need and how, the pedagogy of thought and learning is. So you're already a leg up with many of those that may miss some of those steps, right? You know how to connect to whether it's children or the parent or even the adult learner. And so it really was knowing where I want to take my energy and put it in. And I, as a side hobby, I enjoy art. So again, the instructional design kind of fed all those pieces. But networking and starting with what really drives your passion outside or re-looking in, that's what helped me in the very beginning.
Can I also add something? Somebody said earlier about trying to figure out what it is you want to do. But if you're brand new to a field, you don't know what you want to do until you have figured out what you don't want to do.
Yeah, and Liz, I'll tell you what, I have a question I was about to ask you that's going to feed into this. So
Okay,
let me do
perfect.
that.
You got it.
And Lindsay, I know there's a couple of questions in there if you can keep track of them. Jen, I want to get back to yours, but not yet. And there's a reason for this. So one of the things that Nicole just hit on was some of the different titles that are out there. And I think that will help drive our conversation and also where Liz was just going. I've got a list of some of the titles. The first thing I'm going to give you my 2 cents here is that it's difficult because the same titles don't mean the same things at different companies, right? So we're going to go, I see lots of nodding that you've been through this. So I want to go through, and I'm going to start with Liz because the first couple I have on my list are more into your wheelhouse. And then Amy, I'm going to jump to you for some of them as well. So the first one is kind of a combo here. Instructional designer, we've heard mentioned a couple of times tonight. So, the question is, what is an instructional designer? And my bonus thing is, learning experience designer because I personally made this change on my resume and things recently that it seems to be the new verbiage for that. Right. And so Liz, what is an instructional designer and or a learning experience designer?
So I kind of think of them as the same, but you're right. I'm also seeing the term learning experience used as well. So I mean, an instructional designer in its most basic sense is somebody who writes instructions. And if you write instructions clearly, then the learner knows what to do. It's come to mean, I think, a person who designs courses and curricula for a population, whatever the population of employees is. In my case, in my most recent job, I did some design of annual required training that was for 9,000 people, but I also did some very specific design of training for very small groups of smaller groups like nursing staff. So it doesn't really matter who the population is. I think what's more fickle than even the what an instructional designer or a learning experience designer is called is how they decide to make a hierarchy of it. Like I recently applied for a position of lead learning experience designer, and I happen to know somebody at the company where I applied, and she said, in this company, a lead is usually an entry-level job. And my response was, well, I read the job description and there's nothing entry-level about it, but the learning industry hasn't really picked up on the same corporate hierarchy. So like you will see a job that says training specialist, and somebody who has acquaintance with corporate roles. A specialist sometimes is somebody who's a beginner, but the people who I worked with at Einstein who were training specialists had like 30 years of experience and had trained thousands of people. So,
and let's narrow back to the instructional
Yeah.
design piece for a minute. So I think one thing that's important is, I know you do personally, you work on e-learning design.
yes.
All right. And so, and actually, I don't know the answer to this, but for example, I do some e-learning design in my design work, but more towards things like PowerPoint, like the presentation that you saw at the top of this that gets used for, whether it's for virtual delivery or in-person delivery. So those all kind of fall under the instructional design bucket. However, like Liz knows how to design an e-learning course a lot better than I do. So we wouldn't necessarily be going for the same kind of jobs.
And sometimes they will want an instructional designer who designs only for in-person classes, where they ask you to do a participant guide and a facilitator guide, which is like the same as a teacher's guide and a student workbook, to go back to school teaching. So it's very, very, very broad.
Yeah, and one other one that I'll throw in there that's interesting too is, you may see the title developer, and at least in my experience, that's been instructional design is you got to have more of the education knowledge, whereas developer is more about taking what that instructional designer or learning experience designer has done and putting it into the program itself. So those
I think
people,
that's true.
yeah,
That's definitely true. But a lot of instructional design jobs also require you to be the developer.
yes.
I personally like doing both. Not that I can't explain what my ideas to somebody who will then develop the software, but when I build those ideas, I kind of have this vision and like I want to execute it.
Yeah. So let's jump to Amy, because there are a couple of main camps now within learning and development. You have the people who, and now the other reality is that I think we're seeing for those of us who have been looking at job postings, more and more the jobs are becoming jack of all trade kind of things. But for those where it is specialized, you'll tend to see instructional design or learning experience design in one bucket, and then facilitation in another bucket. And that's more the facilitation and the delivery piece, I think, is more Amy's wheelhouse. So, like we have titles like facilitator, program manager. I don't know, there may be others out there, but if you want to talk about some of the roles.
Yeah, I mean, as everybody's saying, it is a bit confusing because people use different titles for the same thing. So normally your facilitator role is what you would think of. You could be receiving the design from a learning experience designer or instructional designer, and all you're doing is facilitating that program, whether it be a virtual like we're doing now, or whether it be an in-person, where your role is to facilitate that content and, utilize the design that someone gave you. So that's a role. Program manager, that can be interesting. That could be a variety of things. For example, it could be that somebody comes to a learning and development department and says, I have a project, I have a problem, I have a whatever. And your program manager could be the person assigned to that. And they're to look into, what's going on, what are the needs, what is the problem. They could be somebody that manages the facilitator and the instructional designer, and oversees the project, the process. That could be potentially what is going on with the program manager. So I, as Josh mentioned, I'm a jack of all trades. So I have my instructional design degree. I'm a manager. I facilitate virtually in person. I do the needs assessment, the strategic plan for the department. So you've got learning and development manager or leadership development manager that oversees everything, but that could also be a program manager role or a director role. So yeah, it really is very different based on industry, also based on size of companies. Whether you do the whole thing or it's broken into pieces, maybe somebody does the needs assessment to find out what are the needs. And then it's passed off to the instructional designer, right? Where the designer designs, and then it's passed off to the facilitator, where the facilitator facilitates. So, it's hard to describe all of the roles, I think, because there's no uniformity to it. But if you're hearing some of these, you can kind of, when you're reading the job descriptions and stuff, you can kind of see, oh, looks like they're looking somebody to design and facilitate in this role. Regardless of what the title is, look at the descriptions to see what are they asking you to do, and then how do you match up to that?
Yeah, and I think,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think one important thing is to your point, is knowing the vocabulary, right? So we're going to use some of it tonight. Reading job descriptions, I think, helps. Some of the resources I think we'll get to and share also helpful on that front. And along that end, I want to jump back to the question Jen had asked earlier about, okay, so how do I can either read it, or Jen, if you want to come off and just ask it again here, I think it's a good question.
So I know, I think, Elizabeth, I think you had mentioned how when you were first, I remember somebody had mentioned how, coming from a teaching background, especially if that's been your only career, you have absolutely no corporate experience. You can quantify what you've done, you can quote unquote translate it. How do you influence the corporate world, the business world, this totally different industry, to kind of take your skills seriously, and that they do transfer?
And I think for this one, Nicole, you might be the right person to start with here. being that you're in those roles now and, had that, or maybe not, but I'll give you the first pass at this.
Okay, no, I'll try to answer this, and I saw that chat in the chat. So for me, it would again, it's talking to them in the way of when I first started. Okay, this is very fluffy, but it's the truth. When I was first on board as HR recruiting coordinator, I said, listen, parents care about their children, right? They want the best for them. They want it to be successful. They want things to go the right way. Same with a business. The business wants things to be successful. The manager wants to have their area exceed and excel. And so what I understand from my experience is that I'm goal driven. I am a good communicator and listener and executor. I'm resourceful. So it's kind of, it's a very indirect way of answering their questions, but taking what you know and inherently and turning it into, and believe it or not, I think like that, even though at the time I thought, what am I saying? And I can't believe I'm saying this, it actually resonated with them to understand that I can connect the dots so they can connect the dots. So again, I would say to talk about some transferable skills, your communication skills are there. You have great organization skills. You have the ability to understand people in general. You are already a people-centric person. So you're going to naturally gravitate to be a client facing or a client satisfactory. Like you're going to look at that person or that team and you're going to come with care. You're going to, I guess that's where it is. It's I took what those inherent skills were and I just tried to apply it to what that job was. Again, I also started off small. Somebody called it out. There was a gap in my pay. I did go backwards, but it was very short-lived for the amount of time that I knew that I had to get to know in two different ways. I had to get to know two different industries, and both of them I had to take a step in a moment, but I will tell you it was short-lived and it ended up paying off. So I would say be flexible in those coordinator jobs, because what happens is you end up becoming support for everyone within that team and beyond, and you become almost like a sponge, which would also help to navigate where you might want to land. I found out that I actually don't like facilitating in front of adults. It was not the same for me for children, so I knew that I'd much rather build the content, stay in the background, be a producer on Zoom, again, the instructional design from where my world is. But I had to get a little down and dirty, and start at the base and understand I'm going to take a year or two. I gotta do it. And then from there, I was able to also network and get mentorships to build me. And some companies, most companies that I found is in that time, they will pay for your certification or credentialing. So as long as you have those conversations and find that mentor to help you. So then I know for me, out of pocket to go ahead and recert after I've just spent, whatever on other areas, I was like, that's not reality for me to dig deeper in loans. So it was more feasible for me to take a pay cut for that year or two, get my credentials with them, get a baseline of that industry and that group and maybe some other areas. And then I was able to kind of navigate accordingly. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'll add on one small thing to that we've already echoed a couple of times here, which is networking. Because the reality of job applications at this point is the computer's got to like you, right? That if you're just applying cold into stuff, it's looking for keywords, it's got an algorithm, you don't know what those are. Maybe you write a great cover letter that tells your story and maybe it's read, or now you can write cover letters with AI. So your AI can talk to their AI and see where it goes, right? But there's no substitute for that human connection piece. So that's part of the way I would answer your question, Jen, is that you got to have those transferable skills, but you got to get to the people who are open-minded to consider them. And that's really where the networking comes in. And Liz, I know you wanted to chime in, so go for it.
Yeah, I think also to the extent that you can, even before you get to an interview, if you're lucky enough to get an interview, you have to try to figure out what their problems are. Like, what are their challenges for the job that you're applying for? And sometimes you have to think on your feet, like in an interview, to ask them that question. What are your biggest challenges? What do you struggle with here? But as a teacher, you already have that skill of being able to think on your feet and think right away of a way that you can solve their problems, or at least help.
Yeah, and I mean, the one question that I bring up a lot when we talk about that, I mean, because training has some formal methodologies and there's dispute among which is the right one. One you may have heard of, and if you don't know this one, you can look it up. It's ADDIE. It's a model, and actually it has a interesting history in that it was developed out of the military in basically World War II. But the first step of it is assessment. And that leads kind of to the question of, and thanks for putting that in, Amy, what problem are you trying to solve? Right. And so that to that piece of it, that's kind of one of the missions that we have as L&D professionals, is consulting to the organization and saying, you know, what is it that we need to solve, and then trying to come up with the solutions for that. All right, let's move on to, there's been some other good questions in here. Lindsay, you got one you can tee up for me here?
So we did have a question about other positions within the field. So specifically like outside of curriculum design, if there are others that we want to talk about now, or if we're going to touch on those later, we do have.
Now's a good time. I saw something in there about tech writer. Is that the one we were?
Yes.
Any of the panel want to speak to that one? If not, I can kind of shed some light. So interestingly, like, I'm working on a project right now. The work I'm doing is I'm doing some consulting contracting work, and I'm building out some e-learning courses for a company, and they have some support staff that really was meant or really assigned more to the marketing side, because they don't really have a training staff per se. But so one of those people is a graphic designer, so getting logos and icons and those kind of stuff. And another one's a content writer. And I've also worked with technical writers in the past in a couple of different positions I've had where I was developing technical training. And typically the technical writing things that I've seen, one, that's a skill unto itself, right? And I know some people who are technical writers, you got to be very detail oriented, very thorough. So if that's something that you're interested in, then that can be a way to go. And then, you know, like in one of my experiences, it was a consumer electronics company, and I worked with a lot of the engineers, but the technical writer was actually writing the manuals for the products. So she would have a lot of the detail and had to learn everything from the engineers, but I got to talk to her as opposed to the engineer. So it saved me at least a little bit of, she did some of the filtering. So I wasn't starting with as much raw stuff. So there are a lot of jobs that I would say that are on the periphery of some of the main jobs we talked about. I mean, instructor and instructional designer are going to be at the top of the list of the things that you see, along with like coaching is another one. There's one other one that's change management's another big thing that can be part of it. And there are different certifications in each of those things. And then there's, I'm going to say support staff, but I don't even know that that's the right way to do it. But it's those other people that are maybe part of the team that aren't in one of those functions that we might, like a graphic designer. And I know people who do graphic design for training material, and that's their thing. But just because you're a graphic designer doesn't mean you do training. If you're doing instructional design, you're pretty much building training, right? So it's that kind of thing, that some of those positions are definitely more broad. All right. Did that answer that, hopefully?
Another position that you'll see a lot of is LMS administrator, which is the LMS, the learning management system, is the platform where all of the courses for a given company are hosted. In academic, and at least in higher ed, I know they use Canvas a lot. I don't know what they're using in public school right now.
Like
But,
Blackboard might be out there too, I'm
yeah.
guessing.
That's a big skill that sometimes is included in instructional design jobs, like at the bottom of the list, and sometimes you end up doing more of it than you want to. That, you don't really manage content. You don't really design content at all, but you are in charge of hosting it and making sure it lives in a place and is accessible to the people who need it.
Yeah, and LMS administrator, and I'm gonna make this as a very generalized comment because it's not necessarily true everywhere. It tends to be more of an admin kind of job. That doesn't mean you necessarily want to steer away from it for the reasons Nicole was hitting on earlier, that it's a way to get in and be part of a team, and more of that learning how training teams operate, getting the experience on your resume, and possibly getting promoted from within.
But it's very IT and very techy, and some LMSs require skills that I'm afraid of, like file transfer.
I would say less IT, but more if you feel tech savvy using web applications and stuff, because it does have a very most of them have very hierarchical structures. There's a lot of reporting because you have to do like completion reports of who's finished classes. And some of it then becomes chasing down people to finish the classes they haven't done, those kinds of things. But it might be a starting point, right? Depending what you're looking at. There was another interesting one in there, and I have an opinion, but I want to see what else we got here, especially because we do have a couple of current job seekers on our panel. But the question in there I saw in there was about what's better to go for, in-person, hybrid, or remote. And again, I have some opinions, but I think it comes down to preference, but I'd rather hear from Amy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I think it is preference. I have to say I haven't done a lot of in-person, obviously because of the pandemic. It's been mostly virtual instructor-led webinars or leadership training. I still find a lot of companies have not gone back to in-person. Now some healthcare companies have, because most of their people are in anyway. So it kind of depends on the organization and how they're handling, whether it's remote or hybrid or whatever. What I would say to you, however, is to get yourself an ability to be able to train remotely or in person, because that is going to make you very marketable. So, for the however many years of my career was all in person. And then I started working in global companies. Well, in a global company before the pandemic, they wanted to do things online. They didn't want to fly people around the world, right? It's expensive. So I got myself skilled up in doing virtual learning, using the tools that we have, understanding either Zoom or Teams or WebEx, or there's a million of them out there, GoToMeeting. Knowing how to use the tools, knowing how to make it interactive. You can't just take an in-person course and do it virtually. You need to adjust it. It's not quite the same. But having the ability to do in-person facilitation and virtual remote, and is a huge skill area to have. And I know one of the jobs that I had with Mainline Health, I think I got that job because I had so much experience training virtually, because they did everything in person. And then of course the pandemic, they couldn't do anything. So they were shut down other than they were doing onboarding. And I said, oh, well, I can teach you all how to train online. That's not a problem. So I helped to train up the team. And then I started conducting webinars and leadership development. And so that's a big skill to have. So most of you teachers probably have done the same thing, right? You've used technology, you've trained virtually, you've trained in person. That's a big selling skill for you right there. Don't minimize that.
Yeah, and what let me add on to that, that we've been very fortunate to have some well-known within our industry facilitators come and speak to us. I think it was, I can't remember exactly when, it was in the spring though. And the reason I mention this is it is recorded and it's in the library once you become a member. That we had Cindy Huggett, who has literally written multiple books on, like, as the guide for virtual delivery for, we mentioned the Association of Talent Development before ATD. She has a couple of books published by them. Did a webinar for us that talks about some of what's in that book. We have another webinar that you could attend live in September from Cassie Labori, who is also going to talk about virtual delivery. And she is also offering a certificate program that we're presenting coming up in October, or it might be November. I'd have to look at the dates. But, and I'll just say most of our programming ends up being free with membership. These, anytime we do a certification, that's a different story. So if you look at that and see a price tag on it, that's why. But it's still pretty reasonable compared to some of the other options out there. So yeah, and the only other comment I'm going to make, and then we can move on to the next question, is I think one thing that I've seen in the job market recently, and I'm curious if anyone on the panel has insight on, or, agrees or disagrees with this, is you mentioned difference between in-person, hybrid, and remote. The biggest thing I've seen is your competition based on those things. Because if you're applying for remote jobs, unless there's like some time zone specific thing, you're competing with basically everybody in the country. And even if it's time zone, then you're competing with like the East Coast, right? And what I think that leads to is people who are hiring into those jobs are getting inundated with applications, and they're more likely to find somebody who matches exactly the experience that is there, as opposed to some of the flexibility we were talking about. When you get into in-person and hybrid, you're now competing with people who are willing to commute to the location where the position is. So that doesn't mean you're not going to be up against people, but it's a different population. And then you got to decide if you're okay leaving the house and putting on pants with the zipper. That's really the other piece of this, which is that's a reality. All right. So that good conversation so far. I think one thing I want to make sure we talk about here, and I think it may have sort of come up and it's on my list of stuff, is resources. So we keep saying walk the walk, learn the vocabulary, all that kind of stuff. So first and foremost, L&D Philly, obviously. Shannon, you've been investigating a lot of these. And I know some of them are probably ones I gave you at some point, but any go-to sites where you're getting good information now? And I'd actually like to try to lead with the ones that are either free or low cost, because I think there's a lot of that.
There is. I've been using a lot of the links on your page, so that's been really helpful.
There is a resources page on the L&D Philly website, which I'm actually looking to try to update. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there, and we'll throw that in the chat.
There's a lot of that. There's the Udemy ones were really cheap. Like I don't think I paid more than like $25 for any of them. And then I've been actually listening to a lot of podcasts as well. So there's one that you all might be familiar with, the teacher career coach, Daphne. She like talks about transitioning into different spaces, mostly HR and L&D spaces. And ATD, the Association for Talent Development, has one called the Accidental Trainer that I've been listening to a lot as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot out there to be had.
All right. Amy, I'm sure you have a bunch of them too.
Yeah, I just put one in the Bob Pike group. They've been, actually it's kind of sad. I just heard that Bob is in hospice, which he's a trendsetter in the L&D space. and it's been around for a while. But his group does some free webinars. Some of them are on virtual delivery, icebreakers, all that kind of stuff. So you can just sign up to get their emails. So I do get those. Ken Blanchard Company also has a free webinar once a month. It tends to be around leadership development, but again, it's free. So you want to look for, like somebody mentioned earlier, understanding more of the language of learning and development and how it's different from being a teacher, so that if somebody asks you questions, you're understanding, what are they asking about and how can you relate to what they're saying. When you're designing your curriculum, it's probably very similar to how I would design curriculum, but you want to know some of the lingo. And I think being a part of LMU Philly and ATD will really help you with that. LMS, people will ask you, what's your experience with an LMS, the learning management system? There's a whole bunch of LMSs. I haven't found one that I like yet, to be honest with you. And I
Nope.
don't think
No,
anybody has.
Nobody does. There's like
Um,
400 of them or
There
something.
is a good one. I'll get it when Amy's finished.
Okay.
So yeah, so you want to get that familiarity, and I think some of these learning groups I did put in earlier. This is not free, but Langevin is a company that specifically trains learning and development people. That's all their training is around. And they also do certifications, but they do courses. So if you just wanted to do a course, I'm not sure what the cost is. I haven't checked that recently, but they're pretty reputable, as a resource. So those are some that I can think of.
Yeah, and I want Liz, I know you want to talk, and also specifically, you posted Training Mag in there, which I try to refer to everybody I run across. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So there's, I don't even know how it started, but there's, if you Google trainingmagnetwork.com, mag as in magazine.
I think the whole website is just trainingmag.com.
Oh, okay. They have free webinars, pretty much like every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, some other aspect of learning and development. Like any webinar, some of them are sleepers, but there are some that are excellent, and you can like listen to them when you drive. So it's not, you don't have to sit on camera. I mean, nobody's on camera on these, so it's kind of relaxed and low stress. But talking
And they're
about,
mostly recorded as well. So there's a
Yes.
whole archive of those.
yes,
And there's an actual magazine that goes with it that you can either get in print or digital. So again, more about the idea of being able to get some of the vocabulary stuff. I like Training Mag because it's also free,
yes.
right? So it's that I try to start with the free resources and work my way up from there.
So that segues into what I was going to say about an LMS. That's good. So there's a company called SCORM Cloud, SCORM. That's a technical term for a piece of learning content. SCORM Cloud is in cloud in the cloud, where you can get a free account, so that if you are trying to practice on like e-learning authoring software like Articulate or Captivate, and you want to have a place to host your project, if you don't have a website, you can have a SCORM Cloud account for free, where you can upload some of the courses that you design, so that if a prospective employer wants to see the kind of work you can do, you can send them a link. It's a wonderful resource, and the company that operates it, it's Rustici Software. They are fabulous with customer service. So like, you have questions, they're on it.
All right. So we got an LMS recommendation out of this too, which is learning management systems are controversial, and largely that most people don't like them. Any of them. But it's part of what we work with in our business. And interestingly, so another one that came up was ATD a couple of times. I think ATD is a good thing for everybody to know about. It is the Association of Talent Development. I'm going to go back to Amy on this one, as Amy has been a speaker at their big conference multiple times. So if you want to share a little bit about them as a national organization, they do have a local chapter here that Amy's also volunteers with. So another good resource to look at. But let's start with the national piece of it, Amy.
Yeah, I do recommend ATD as well as L&D Philly. I'll put them both equal here. They're both really important. I have felt, me personally, since I've been in this field my whole life, that me being an ATD national member, it's not a certification, it's just being a member, is important for my role. Because to me, it says to others, I'm keeping up to date in my field. And I do go to the national conference every year. I try to speak. I didn't speak this year, but I did apply for next year. So hopefully they'll choose me to speak.
And you did speak like 4 years in a row or something?
5, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And this is it's a big conference. I mean,
yes.
Pre-pandemic, it was definitely over 10,000 people. Now it's probably a little under that.
Right.
But also good networking opportunity. As
Right.
I am not a member of the actually, I take that back. I am a member now. I joined to go to the conference because of the way their rates work. Again, from the vocabulary side of it, it gets you discounts on books and white papers and certain articles and things. So if you want to do a lot of reading, I think it's valuable. But again, it's a cost thing. And I think their memberships generally run, although I think they're doing a sale this week, but I think they generally run like $250 or so. So that may be cost prohibitive for some.
200 probably to 400 depending on the level. They do have webinars, pretty frequent webinars on different topics. They do have the TD magazine that you get monthly. So it's like any professional association. And then of course there's a local chapter. Now you can join the local ATD without being a member of the national, which is of course like $99, or if you're in transition, I think it's half of that.
I think
And
that's true.
Like 49.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's another, good place to meet people, network, listen to what people are talking about. People might be there with jobs or be posting jobs with ATD like they do with L&D Philly. But I try to stay very connected to ATD because I think it's important for my career.
Awesome. Let's see if we,
Also,
go ahead, Shannon.
I just wanted to add, once you become a member, when you want to take their certification classes, there's like a little discount involved with that too.
Yeah, if you decide that you actually want to go down the path of going to an ATD conference, the national organization, or taking one of the certificates, it's literally cheaper to buy the membership and register as a member than it is to register as a non-member. So that's why I currently have a membership. And Lois, I want to get to your question, but I see Nicole put something in the chat that's getting some likes here. So SHRM is interesting. So why don't you tell, for those who don't know what SHRM is, and I'm reading SHRM as SHRM because that's how you say it. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my experience is that learning and development has been under the scope of HR. So that's really why I've gone into it. But SHRM is the Society of Human Resources and Management. So it's really giving, it really runs the gamut, to be honest with you. But I think it would be helpful for all of you that are looking for transition with, some of the trends of the workforce. So as an example, I just went into, without the membership, but you get some high level articles and things that talks about, like, again, I'm going to play to mine, but it's like instructional design. It gets some methodology. It gives accessible learning designs, reaching all learners. So it just gives it another avenue and insight. And then there is like this one, talk about change management. It says as changing workforce training, now that it's designed during the pandemic, but it gives some insight to the world of organizational development, learning and development that might influence where you are. And again, I think it depends on where you land and maybe what area you are. But I found that in my experience, both in the financial and the healthcare, it fell under HR. So I just felt like that was another asset, is to understand a little more of the scope of HR in general too. Not that you need to be the expert by all means or any means, but just being able to understand how HR is, as we know, it's, well, I hope it's not just one thing, it's many things, and you're part of one piece of it. So I just found that to be helpful, because I'll be honest, when I first joined, I never knew what SHRM was. I kept hearing about it, as you're mentioning about the acronyms, the never ending acronyms. And
Yeah.
at least it helped a lot more in that way. So.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there that, so first of all, SHRM is a huge organization. I think, you know, and looking at like their conferences, especially as big as the ATD thing is, it dwarfs that. The thing to keep in mind when you look at SHRM is that it really is, to Nicole's point, it's an HR organization, right? So because a lot of training can sit in HR, and it doesn't always, it may sit in operations as well. They have resources that do impact people in our profession. And then they have a lot of stuff that's more tangential because it's really about HR stuff. So having said that, though, there are multiple local HR or multiple local SHRM organizations. There's a Philadelphia chapter, there's a Valley Forge chapter, there's a New Jersey chapter, and many that I'm not including that are also listed as partners on our website. So another good resource. Let's see, I'm gonna, Lindsay, am I jumping to chat?
Yeah. So we
Okay,
have one that I want to go back to, which was Jacqueline's
okay.
a few minutes ago. And Jacqueline asked whether anyone has been a corporate trainer and would be able to speak to that experience, and if that's like any different than what we've already talked about.
So Jacqueline, because kind of what we're saying, there's, even the term trainer has a lot of connotation. So is there, for what you want to hear, is there more of a specific like direction of, are you looking for like the facilitation side of it or the design side, or you're not sure? Facilitation. All right, who wants to take that one? I have a feeling it might be Amy, but
Sure, why not? So yes, before I moved into management, I was a corporate trainer in a couple companies. And for me, it actually involved more than facilitation. It involved design and facilitation, project management, program management, you know, kind of a combination of things. But if you're in a large enough company, for example, Vanguard, local here in Pennsylvania, I interview with them a lot of times, and I actually don't want a job there, even though everybody else wants to work for Vanguard. I don't, because they divide up everything. They have, you know, the program managers, they have the instructional designers, they have separate facilitation. I think if a title is corporate trainer, you're most likely going to be doing a combination of things. It's rare that that would just be facilitation, unless that's how they're describing it in the description. Usually corporate trainer means a combination of what we've been talking about. Does that help? Is that what you're looking for?
yeah, and as since I also have had that title, I'll share briefly as well in this case. I would say that, you know, so I'm second career into L&D, as, by the way, that's the other thing, most people are. While there were undergraduate programs for you all to become teachers, there are no undergraduate programs that say corporate trainer. The closest I've seen is Temple has an undergraduate program that is more of an OD focus, or it is an OD focus. And even that's rare. So most people find their way to training as a second career. So you're in good company. When I made the switch, it's been 11-ish years. It really was segmented a lot more everywhere. So I came in and I was a trainer. Yeah, I did some design stuff, but I was mostly teaching classes. And the reality is nobody teaches 40 hours a week, right? There's always, it's kind of like the way, you know, people always like, well, what do you do when the school day ends? You just go home and you're not doing anything, right? No papers to grade, no plans to make. You know, corporate training all comes down to preparation as well. What people see is the culmination of a lot of work, right? It's the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. And I think that part is in common. I think that while there are some jobs that primarily are facilitation driven, they're fewer and fewer right now. And it really is becoming more of a jack of all trades. Now, you will find jobs that are entirely instructional design. You will see things that are 100% instructional design, and then you will see things that are more, okay, you're going to do some design, you're going to do some facilitation. It might be program management, it might be LMS administration, and kind of it's a mix of a bunch of stuff. So I think that tends to be where the industry is going right now, but that's a pendulum swing and it might come back. Then again, it might not. Have we addressed that one well then? And I think we have time for one, maybe two more, Lindsay. So what else is up?
So we have two more actually.
Okay.
So
So let's try to get both of them then.
So the first one is, what does the typical day look like? And like, who do you interact with? Who do you report to? That kind of thing.
Hey, Nicole, I'm going to go to you for this one if you're good.
Yeah, sure. I think similarly, like any other day, it's never predictable, but in this, let's pretend I have a project space. So instructional design in my scope, in my world, and what it means is most likely I have a project to build upon. And one of the things that I wanted to actually input was talk about collaboration. So many times, and I would say 90% of what I do is really in the crux of collaboration. So you're not just alone in building a program or content. Specifically, there's been opportunities that I've been bleeding into, no pun intended, being in healthcare, in the way of I'm going to meet with people that are in, let's say, population health, and they wanted to talk about diabetes in the hospital and the care. I am not an expert. I cannot do any of that. I might have some insight to it, but in that, essentially, what it looks like is that you meet with them, and to what Josh pointed out is that what is it that you need? What is the end result, and what are you looking for? And then us as the kind of the instructional designer or the collaborator, you're creative already. Again, you're able to think on your toes. You have the experience of saying, this will be engaging. And believe it or not, at all ages, Josh and I talked about this earlier today, gamification, meaning make it fun, make it rewarding. You know how to do that. And adult learners are the very similar. So it's going with your, what we call SME, here's another acronym, subject matter expert. And you talk to them and you say, what are you looking for? Okay, what's your end result? And then you say, I'm going to take it away. Give me your information. I see that you want to do X, Y, and Z. And then you get to be creative. They actually do really trust the approach in which you get. And you have some creative freedom in that as well. And then you'll have the tools to get creative. I'll be honest, I feel like I'm tech savvy, but not an expert. So it is sometimes about the hunt peck, you know, you make it work and then you figure it out for the next time. But yeah, so I think from the day, what it looks like is it's just a lot of collaboration, and then you get that independent time where you have to be self-driven. You have to keep your own self and organization together, because you might have multiple projects at the same time. And again, many of you, that's already there. So it's a little bit of, some days I have meetings, nothing but meetings, and then I block my calendar purposeful so I can sit and think about that critical element of how do I want to get this message across for the learner, but also make it succinct for the facilitator as well. I hope that helps.
All right.
I would
Yeah,
add
please.
that in the subject matter expert relationship and internal and external clients, teachers are good at connecting with people, and you will need that skill. In fact, that's a skill that you already come with. You know how to learn and to help other people learn and make those connections. And sometimes I find if I'm working on a really difficult subject that I don't know anything about, if I can make a good personal connection with the subject matter expert, it so enriches the course, because I learn from them, and I learn what they need. So it's for me, that's a very fun part of this work.
Good stuff. And Lindsay, so we got one more, huh?
Yes. So Jennifer put in a question and is wondering what would be your top 5 things to include in a portfolio, and whether a website is the best way to share this.
Ooh, this is going to be interesting. All right. Maybe rather than one person doing a top 5, we share 1 or 2. Liz, is that you brimming to go or?
No, it wasn't, but it's something that that I've been actively thinking about in the last 2 weeks. I like to show either links or examples of a certain kind of like e-learning interaction that I know people might be interested in. Like the classic e-learning interaction is you click on something and another thing pops up. Sometimes it's an explanation, sometimes it takes you somewhere else. So I try to think of creative projects where I've done that creatively, and I might show that.
And so for what's interesting too is I know we're talking about that positions are generalized now. However, there's different the the portfolio for an instructional designer or learning experience designer is going to have a different tilt than somebody who's more of a facilitator. Largely that some of the e-learning stuff, especially, right? Like if you don't know articulate storyline, that may be one that's a good thing to pick up. That's where a lot of this e-learnings are designed, and where I tend to work on any kind of e-learning stuff is a program that they also have called Rise, which is more cloud-based and is meant for rapid development. And so like, for example, I have a portfolio item that is a Rise course, and Liz has portfolio items like she was talking about that are full storyline courses she can show people. For facilitators, you know, there's a couple of different things it could be. It could be your slides, right? In some cases, people may have things they've recorded. Amy, I don't know if you use recordings of any of your like conference presentations or anything, for example, if you have anything to share on that front.
I mean, I think if you are, going for a role that includes facilitation or is a facilitator, you would definitely want to have some kind of a video that shows you in action. I think because what can show you better than that? What could sell you better than that is, and even if you don't have an audience and you're just training to the Zoom screen, and recording that, it's showing your personality, it's showing how you come across to people, your credibility. So I think that is really important. That was going to be one of the things I said, Josh. So you got it from me. I think a trainer's guide, if you're an instructional designer, that shows, if I'm handing this off to somebody, it shows you exactly what to do, what to say, what to use, what page of the participant guide are we on, etc. That shows your detail, your organization. If you're a virtual instructor, again, it could be the slides, but you will also want to show how do you make it engaging, because when you're in person, people can't hide. When you're virtual, people can hide. So how do you engage them and get them involved? And so maybe you show some activities that you use or something like that. So you want to show up as different. You want to show up your value in your portfolio.
Yeah, and I think this is a good opportunity to bring in the whole panel. So Nicole, and part of you may have your ID, and I saw you put some stuff in here, like what you have as an ID as a portfolio. But since I happen to know you're interviewing facilitators at the moment, I think talking about the what the interview looks like for a facilitator may be something that most people coming into this don't know what that is, including what the directions usually are to show up for one of those.
Yeah. So yeah, for a facilitator, typically what will happen past the actual interview itself, and you get past the conversation, is an invite to then show your skills. Either they're going to make a decision whether it's live or on Zoom. And I would say get ready to be more back in person. We're just seeing a lot more in general, I know from our perspective, we are pushing more back into person, but we have hybrid, so there's still that opportunity. But basically, you're going to be asked to come with a presentation that you can build and then exemplify to either a group or maybe a panel within the team, but it usually is going to be something within a time constraint. So it really allows, we want to make sure you know how to present, you have an energy behind you, you have a succinct thought, you're able to carry it through, not just with the time. You don't need to fit everything in that, let's say 15, 20 minutes, but you just want to be able to carry through. And so we just want to see how you interact in an actual classroom with participants, with questions and things of that nature. And then most likely you go from there to your typical standard questions going back and forth between you as a candidate, us as the interviewers. But most certainly coming prepared with the ability to show what you would look like in an actual training situation or facility.
Yeah, and the one commonality is, you did a great job describing that, is what's interesting though is the directions you'll get into it. And I recorded, one of the links I put into the chat was a podcast I was a guest on 2.5 years ago. So it's still current and fits what I'm about to say. And by the way, just in the list of podcasts, it's the If You Ask Betty podcast, which is hosted by Betty Danowitz, someone I work with and as one of my friends. She does a great series of stuff on a million topics that I highly recommend it. But one I did in a little bit more depth on what Nicole just went through. The actual direction that I have received as an interviewee and I've given as a hiring manager typically says something like, come prepared with a presentation of 15 minutes on a topic of your choice, right? That's it. You don't know what you're walking into. You don't know who your participants are going to be. You don't know what the setup's going to be. So you don't know their knowledge base. It's a very interesting experience. And I think it's way different than the way most interviews for most professions are. Like, I don't think accountants come in and do a balance sheet in front of people, for example. Right. But that is the standard interview to expect if you're going for a job that involves teaching. Right. And obviously, in this case, we're talking about corporate training teaching, but still teaching.
And I would say to go back to the original that we've mentioned before, go back to that job description to learn about what that group and what they support. So that helps you to choose some of maybe a topic so you don't feel so, there's so many different topics, but if they mentioned, I don't know, again, the top of my head, so it's going to feel more fresh as performance management, then okay, like how to make goals or, something along those lines. But again, it's using what you know and of the job description in your favor and making it relevant, because then, that'll be eaten alive in a good way.
Yes.
They'll see that you can connect the dots to their group.
And Shanice, bring us home on this. Have you gotten a chance to get a portfolio going yet? Or are you in the early stages here?
I'm in the very early stages. Choosing my topic. I want to pick something that resonates with like a broad range of businesses. So probably going to go with something along the lines of like a soft skill thing, like time management or something like that. But yeah, we actually just started working on that this week. So I'm excited about that.
Good stuff. All right. So we are almost at time, and I want to take a couple of minutes just to thank my panel here and to wrap up. So let's see, back to my presentation here. I'm going to throw this up again. Please come get a membership. Also, by the way, if somebody just goes to our website, they can, and go to the membership site, they can initiate a membership, and it'll actually send them an email asking for the same exact information. So any of your colleagues that you know out there, if you want to share this with them, we'll extend the free membership to anybody who is making the transition. And so I hope you take advantage of that. If any of our panelists, if you want to throw your LinkedIn into chat, feel free to do that. All the LinkedIn links are actually also in the event description. And I think therefore in the reminder emails that you all got. So if you scroll through there, I think you can just click and link. So that's it. Clink is click and link. You can do that to get to the in various profiles from our panelists tonight. And so again, thank you to our great panel, to our participants, and you know, feel free to reach out, come to more of our events. And Shannon, especially as our resident transitioning teacher and volunteer here, we're going to continue discussing some additional programming. So she may be a good person to reach out to as well, if you have ideas of things that would help us. Thanks, Shannon.
Josh, are you, two things. Number one, are you able to share the chat with us?
Actually, that is a good point, and everybody right now should be able to go into, if you go open the chat and there should be 3 dots there, there's an option that says save chat.
Okay, perfect. And I was going to offer, if you think of something that you didn't get to ask, or you had a question that was not answered, and if I could be of any help, I would be happy to. Please connect with me on LinkedIn or any way you like. Thank you, Josh, for having us.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think that our community is very welcoming that way and has a desire to pay it forward. So yeah, that's genuine about reaching out, and I'll include myself in that as well. And I believe the whole panel would welcome that as well. So I'll speak for you on that one. All right. Well, thank you all for attending panel. If you want to stick around for a couple of minutes, but otherwise, thank you everybody else, and have a great night.